This past Saturday was the 2017 Belmont Stakes. The Belmont Stakes this year was won by Tapwrit, trained by Todd Pletcher, and we had a great race on Saturday. It was a great racing day, and coming into this Belmont, it was a little bit unusual in that neither the winner of the Kentucky Derby or of the Preakness was running in the Belmont. So Always Dreaming won the Kentucky Derby. He then finished eighth in the Preakness, and his team decided to skip him in the Belmont. And then Cloud Computing, who did not run the Kentucky Derby, came back, won the Preakness, but then he did not run the Belmont. So the Belmont was in a lot of ways wide open. There were your favorites, but it was, a lot of horses definitely had a chance to win. And I think that was reflected in the odds. And also, Classic Empire, who finished fourth in the Derby, second in the Preakness, was almost definitely on a be-year betting favorite in the Belmont, but he was scratched a few days before the Belmont with a relatively minor foot injury, so he didn't run either. So that all of those factors contributed to the openness of this race. And although there, of course, wasn't a Triple Crown at stake, I think this was a really anticipated race because the race for the best 3-year-old is wide open. And also, the Belmont's just a really cool race. It's 1.5 miles, and it's just a lot of fun. So in the race itself, coming into it, the favorite was Irish Warcry. Irish Warcry is the son of Curlin, who was an unbelievable horse, and Irish Warcry was one of the top favorites in the Kentucky Derby, but he did not run particularly well in that race, and I believe finished 10th. Skipped the Preakness, and then he came back, and a lot of people, including me, really liked him in the Belmont. Because if you consider he was one of the fastest horses in this race, but he also had the breeding distance to go 1.5 miles. And in a lot of ways, he did not disappoint in this race. So the way the race was ran was Irish Workride came out of the 7 post, and he went to the lead, and he was on the lead almost the whole race going to the backstretch. And Tapwrit, who I mentioned, who wound up winning the race, he came out of the 2 post, and he got a great start out of the post. And he just stalked the pace the entire time. He was, right in there with Irish Warcry. He didn't overexert himself. And coming into the backstretch, he was still behind, but he made a huge move and wound up beating Irish Warcry. One of the really interesting things about this was that those 2 horses had a significant lead over the 3rd horse, and then even a much bigger lead over the 4th horse in the rest of the field. So well done to Tapper. Congratulations to him in the Todd Pletcher. There were some really interesting things about Tapper coming into this race, and I really liked him. Coming in, he was one of my picks for sure. Number 1 was that he had won the Tampa Bay Derby in convincing fashion, but then, and this is all happening before the Kentucky Derby, of course, but then he came back and he ran the somewhat disappointing 5th at the Bluegrass Stakes. So coming into the Kentucky Derby, there were definitely mixed opinions on him, and he did not run terrible at the Kentucky Derby. In fact, I think he ran quite good. He only finished 6th, but you have to take into account that he had a terrible beginning where he got hit out of the gate. He was on the outside when you wanted to be on the inside. It was the wet track, and so for him to finish 6th was very impressive. That really impressed me. And then also you have to take into account that he's trained by Todd Pletcher. And for me, that meant a few things coming into this race. Number 1 is the fact that, as many people have pointed out, Todd Pletcher has had so much success in the past of running a horse in the Kentucky Derby and then having that 5-week break coming into the Belmont. And also, I thought, especially this year, it might have been beneficial for Tapwrit to be trained by Todd Pletcher, just because I think when Always Dreaming won the Kentucky Derby, of course trained by Pletcher, that was such a big win for Pletcher. But then for Always Dream to come back in the Preakness and finish 8th, I think that was very disappointing for Pletcher and his team. And I think Pletcher as a trainer was really motivated to kind of come back in the Belmont and have a good success. He had two runners. He had Tapwrit and then Patch, and I'll get to Patch in a second. And that was all. So that was something I had in mind. But for it was just a great race between Tapwrit and Irish Warcry. Just so much fun. Um, they both I think in a lot of ways brought their A game in a big way, and it did not disappoint as a race. The third finisher, as I just mentioned, was Patch, and Patch is the one-eyed horse who has had gotten so much publicity, and he's more than just that. He's a great racehorse. He's actually the son of Ewan Rags, who himself won the Belmont, and he Patch was a horse that ran the Kentucky Derby and disappointed a little bit. I believe he finished 14th, but he came back and he ran a big race in the Belmont. He was never really a serious threat to win, but he did beat, to finish third, get in the trifecta um, position. That's really nice for Patch, and I think I'm kind of excited to see what this horse can do. Um, in the next couple of races he runs, because that's a good, there's no shame in finishing behind Tapper and Irish Warcry, who both ran huge races, and to finish ahead of all of those other horses. There were some other pretty talented horses in the field, so to finish above them is a nice job by Patch. Fourth was Gormley, who was actually ridden by Victor Espinosa, who was the jockey for American Pharaoh, the Triple Crown winner in 2015. And some of the other horses were a little disappointing, but sometimes, from the outside looking in, I think the Belmont is such a unique race because, as I mentioned, it is 1.5 miles, and some of these horses just struggle with it, especially if they've sometimes fatigue can set in the third leg, because depending on if they raced in the Derby or the Preakness, they might not be fully fresh and ready to go. But overall, it was a great race, and congratulations once again to Tapwrit, and it was really good to see Irish Warcry run a great race as well. Moving forward now, spinning it ahead, I think there's still a great race, race as in a metaphor, going on for the best 3-year-old in the country. Of course, you have Always Dreaming in there. You have to consider Cloud Computing, Classic Empire, potentially looking at Lee, who did not run great in the Belmont, but he did have a nice Kentucky Derby and Preakness. And then maybe you can throw some others in there, like Irish Warcry. Now Tapwrit enters, and then maybe McCracken as well, who was a horse who is popular coming into the Derby, but did not run great in the Derby. So we're going to see a lot of these 3-year-olds continue to race over the course of this summer. Some in races bigger than others. So definitely keep an eye out on some of these. I'll try to make some videos giving some updates on how some of them are doing. I think that potentially one of the biggest races that will happen is the Haskell, which is in late June at Monmouth Park. And I think that's potentially a race where you're going to see multiple of these horses running. So you might see Always Dreaming, Irish Warcry, Classic Empire, Cloud Computing, and maybe one or two of these other ones were, that are in the discussion for the best 3-year-old. And potentially another one emerges. It's not too late for for another 3-year-old to, sort of come out of nowhere and maybe not become the best 3-year-old, but certainly challenge for some of these races that are just for the 3-year-olds. And then, of course, one, looking a little bit further ahead is the Breeders' Cup, and then, of course, that's where you bring in some of the older racehorses and the 4-year-olds, such as Arrogate, who is so famous and has done so well. How is he going to do moving forward? Is he going to keep being dominant? Could someone potentially challenge him? Maybe a horse like Gunrunner, who's been running so well lately. So there's so many interesting things to happen. One thing I would love to see, I really want to see these 3-year-olds continue to run against each other, because I think that's fun, and I think there's so much talent that I'd really want to see them go at it a little bit and just try to see who's the best one. Or not just see who's the best one, because there's really no way. It's difficult to determine that. I just love to see them race, just challenge each other. That potentially bring out the best in each other. But I will say that, you know, looking a little bit even further ahead, I would love to see some of these current 3-year-olds run against a horse like Arrogate. So maybe an Always Dreaming Classic Empire Arrogate matchup, and then again throw Cloud Computing in there, Irish Warcry, Tapwrit, McCracken. And I don't want to leave any of the horses out because there's a bunch of other 3-year-olds like Looking at Lee, um, who again did not run Grand at Belmont, but maybe give him a little pass on that. And then there's a bunch of others ones. There's a bunch of other ones as well. So keep an eye out for these races. They're not always the biggest races, with the most fanfare, but they are important. Some of them do lead straight into the Breeders' Cup. And then there's some bigger ones like the Haskell for me, is a great one to keep an eye out. And again, that could be a really nice field. We'll see. There's no definites, but we'll see. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed the Belmont Stakes. It was a great race, and let's keep an eye out for these horses moving forward into the summer and into the Breeders' Cup. Thanks again for watching.